they are going to underperform because they're so overvalued and they're artificially propped up by the printing of money that's not even printed still, but it's added to a computer screen. So you either have to, like, it's unfortunate, but it's reality. Like, we have to get back to reality that there is no something for nothing. There is no holy grail of passive income that you just close your eyes, hand your money over, and everything magically, voila, just appears and life is great. No, I don't know who's lied to us and told us, you don't need to worry. You don't need to effort. You don't need to worry your pretty little brain with this, Stolba. You just hand your money over to me and I'll take care of it. It's all going to work out. It has not worked out, and it's going to get worse because of what we've been doing in the economy. Money can be complicated. Let a nerd help you. We're here to demystify the complex nature of money by getting you answers from financial nerds and whiz kids. Welcome to Ask the Money Nerds, a weekly segment of the Wealth Labs podcast where we answer your most pressing money questions. Are you worried about inflation? Well, the numbers may be the same in your bank account right now. What those dollars can buy is going to go down. When more money is added to the economy without anyone creating value or doing anything for it, when exchanges slow down due to a quarantine or concerns of recession or loss of jobs, but we're putting more money into the world due to the government deciding or the Federal Reserve, you lose purchasing power. Is gold the answer? Silver? Cryptocurrency? Is it hopeless? Well, let's break down how this works and how to use inflation to your advantage, because if you don't, it will rob you of the value of your money and diminish your quality of life. All right, Stolba. This is kind of like a weird Ask the Money Nerds because we got like close to 300 comments on an inflation video. So we're kind of going through what were people talking about, what are they concerned about, and helping people navigate this, because it's insane that, you know, you kind of have money, you look at it and it's numbers on a piece of paper on a computer screen. You're like, okay, there it is. And it's the same one day, but when they flood a bunch of money in there and nobody did anything for it, your money, even though it's the same number, will have less ability to acquire things in the future. That is, unless you have assets that appreciate with inflation.
Okay.
Or you have a system of maybe acquiring a business or real estate or those types of things versus having it in cash. And look, I'm a proponent of having it in cash until you find the right opportunity, but having it in low yield accounts for long periods of time isn't going to keep up with inflation. So I'm sure you're fired up about this topic.
Yeah, because I've read most of those comments that were on your YouTube channel, and there is a lot of fear and concern and what do I do? And so I really understand where people are coming from. And there is this sense of, what do I do? My money's not worth much. I don't have that much money to begin with. So what is my future going to entail? And so this is part 2. And the question is, what is our biggest money enemy? And if you're tuning in, we already know that's inflation, but let's talk a little bit more about that. Let's dig a little deeper than we did in our first video, and give them solutions as well.
There's a few money enemies, and one is when people just think money is the root of all evil, or they want more of it, but they feel guilty for it, or they don't understand it, and so they just are scared of it and they don't pay attention to it. Or they think that if they just accumulate for 30 years, that compound interest will get them there without considering inflation. It's like a stealth tax. You don't really feel it in the year, but you feel it over the years.
Yes.
You know, it seems like no big deal from time to time. And there's this thing called the Consumer Price Index. It's this basket of goods that the government says, based upon the raised prices of these things, this is what inflation is. But they don't consider everything. And some things, for example, like let's say you buy a vehicle one year, and the next year that price of that vehicle goes up, but it's because there's new technology. They might say, well, that didn't really increase with inflation. It was technological change. So I always consider technological change, planned obsolescence, which are things that break down that you have to, pay for, tax increases, because, taxes could easily go up when we add trillions of dollars, right?
So much money.
I'm also looking at just, just our own propensity to consume, where a luxury once enjoyed becomes a necessity. There's all these factors that are in addition to just normal prices going up over time. Well, if we look at the cost of tuition, or we look at the cost of nursing homes, or we look at the cost of so many things,
much higher today.
And even this, like, imagine some technology's drastically gone down in price, right? So that makes it feel like inflation lowered. But what if we have to replace that more often? What if, because it gets outdated so quickly, we have to go buy something new? I mean, whether it's a phone, buying the next model or whatever that might be is an additional cost, even though the price might have gone down a little bit, but not all the time. Sometimes it goes up. So inflation can be a bit confusing, but to make it really simple, I just think, okay, I've got X amount of money, And if money were fixed, as far as this is where there's a lot of proponent about cryptocurrency, right? Like that Bitcoin, they're not going to make more of the Bitcoin. So it just continues to be, fractionalized and using, different values of what those shares are essentially. So that's an argument where when someone can just put money in there, we have to understand first and foremost, it's the Federal Reserve. And what's crazy, Stolba, it's not federal.
No.
And it's not a reserve. It's a central banking system, okay? Owned by really wealthy individuals that are basically controlling the money supply. And what they do is something called fractionalized banking. I don't know how much you've heard about this or if you know much about it.
Yeah, when a dollar's loaned out more than one time.
Right. So if you go get a loan from a bank and then you deposit, and I get a loan from that bank and then I deposit it and someone else gets a loan, there's a certain reserve requirement that stays in, but we can have that same dollar lent out multiple times. And so as it continues to get lent out more and more times, theoretically, like, cool, that keeps the money moving, but it's kind of like we all have the same, dollar buying some good, but there's really only one of those dollars, but we've spent it 6 times. So
that's so crazy. When did that become such a part of our system?
There was a meeting at Jekyll Island. I believe that's off of Georgia. And we can look at like so many of the people that were in that meeting from JP Morgan, and some of the wealthiest families that exist, and they came up with this fractionalized banking system and then they rolled it out. And there were people like Andrew Jackson that said centralized banking would destroy our economy. So essentially, you hear about something called fiat currency. Okay, so fiat currency is when we have dollars that aren't backed by some commodity like gold. Like there used to be the gold standard, right? And then we left the gold standard back in the Nixon days. And so that became a fiat currency. So all that money really is it's an agreement. We agree that it's valuable. We agree to exchange with it. And this is part of the people in cryptocurrency going, hey, we could invent something like this and have 11 qualities where money only might have 9 qualities and have a central, way to have everybody see what's going on versus a clearinghouse that's controlled by these institutions. And so I understand that argument. And I do think it's time to disrupt that system. But what happens when governments are involved? What happens when someone as powerful as the Federal Reserve is involved? What happens when countries are involved and have their own type of currency? And interestingly enough, we're seeing like people aren't taking cash right now because of COVID. People aren't giving change. So it feels like we're moving pretty digital as it is, because how much cash do you carry around on you?
Not a whole lot. I
carry enough to like give tips, right? At places and pay my kids for stuff when they do things. That's about it. Like otherwise I'm not using it. I like that I can use my phone. That's kind of convenient. But at the same time, when we're on a fiat currency and we just keep adding more and more and more, then it's frustrating because it can devalue our work. It can devalue the representation of the money and what it can get us, right? What it denotes. And so when we have no control over that, that can be frustrating. Now, where's some advantages of that? Well, if you have a 30-year mortgage, and there's a ton of inflation, 10 years down the road, if your payment was $1,500, that $1,500 might only feel like $750 because you have so much more earning that is coming in because of inflation, because wages going up, because of all those types of things. So it actually helps with debt payments. So if you have a 30-year loan, you're 15 years in, it's not going to feel as hard as it did in day one because of inflation, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
And also it could appreciate your assets if you have certain things because of inflation. They could go up in value, right? To hopefully battle that. Like if you bought a piece of real estate, and then like you sell it for more.
Or
vehicles don't typically appreciate. They typically depreciate unless they're collector items or, like some type of low supply of that particular vehicle. But for the majority of the time, the second you drive it off the lot, it takes a huge hit and then it continues to depreciate after that, where houses could go up in value, obviously just regular real estate businesses, and the thing is, most people are just trying to scrimp and sacrifice and save and delay and budget and set money aside, and they put it into paper assets that they go, hopefully that'll be worth more in the future. But ultimately, some of those things can be decimated by inflation if it's certificates of deposit or if it's low yielding bonds or if it's money markets or those kind of things. If that's a long-term strategy, inflation's probably going to make it worth less, even though you'll have more money in the future. You won't be able to buy quite as many things.
All right. So one of the things that people were mentioning in the comments is they want to know what to do now. So I think there's a lot of scarcity around this topic of inflation, right? So if someone isn't a business owner or they feel a little bit scarce. Let's give them some solutions into what they can do, because inflation impacts everyone, right? But it has a significant impact on the middle class and people who are not making as much money, because like you said, the purchasing power is much lower.
Right. And when your foundational things that are required for basic survival start to creep up and be more expensive, and if that raises at a faster rate than your income, then all of a sudden you don't have access to things that you're regularly used to having that are almost become essentials. And so I think we're headed for a scary place that way, because most of this wealth is going to end up in a few people's hands because they understand leverage, because they understand assets, because they're thinking cash flow. When everyone else is trained, set money aside, scrimp, save, sacrifice,
just put
put a little bit away and just work really hard. And the problem is you might work hard for an organization that's not prepared for this. They don't know how to manage cash flow because they're caught up in accumulation, or they don't pay attention to their numbers because they're just artists and they're just excited about the business that they have. So it's unfortunate. And here's the thing. This is the opportunity. 418,000 businesses per year the next 10 years are going to exchange hands and be sold because the baby boomers are going to sell those because it's time for them to be done. And if you just think handing your money to a broker is going to do it for you, it's not. It's not the answer. If handing your money over to an exchange traded fund or a mutual fund, they are going to underperform because they're so overvalued and they're artificially propped up by the printing of money that's not even printed still, but it's added to a computer screen. So you either have to, like, it's unfortunate, but it's reality. Like, we have to get back to reality that there is no something for nothing. There is no holy grail of passive income that you just close your eyes, hand your money over, and everything magically, voila, just appears and life is great. No, I don't know who's lied to us and told us, you don't need to worry. You don't need to effort. You don't need to worry your pretty little brain with this, Stolba. You just hand your money over to me and I'll take care of it. It's all going to work out. It has not worked out, and it's going to get worse because of what we've been doing in the economy. So it means if we're going to have time for this, we have to figure out our investor DNA. Like, what are we going to pay attention to? What are we not going to pay attention to? That's the key. Like, what things do we have, ability and interest and desire to discover? For some, they really enjoy real estate. I don't. I don't like dealing with property management companies. I don't understand how to help tenants properly. I'm not a handyman, and managing handyman is not my forte. Going to banks and talking to attorneys and looking at deal flow and looking at spreadsheets, that doesn't work for me. But there are people that's what their gift is. That's what they enjoy doing. But buying a business is one of those opportunities where we've been trained for decades, for centuries, to buy a home. And when you buy a home, you look at numbers, you get loans, you put your finances together, and you see how this whole thing's going to work within a budget. Well, guess what? Business might have a little bit more difficulty than that, but you have some of the same characteristics in buying that business, putting in a down payment, having to manage the cash flow of that. And I just think that we're going to have videos come out specifically on that because it's so instrumental that we can't close our eyes, cross our fingers, and hope for the best anymore. Inflation is hurting us, and so is the lack of knowledge.
Yes. Yeah. Trust in yourself, own your power, build the skills you need to get to where you want to be. And that might be learning about a business or an industry that you're not familiar with and really knowing the ins and outs of it so you can go down that route. So one of the things people were having a heated argument about in the comment section was, what about gold and crypto and guns? And is there merit to any of these things? Like, as I'm seeking out my investor DNA, should I be researching crypto?
Yes.
Should I know all about that?
We have to learn about it.
Yeah, because it's
Doesn't
not really
mean
going
it's
away.
time to invest in it for most people because it might be highly speculative, but it's really time to learn. It's time to understand what it is and how it works and how it might apply to you and which ones might make sense. And,
and specifically the blockchain, like, even start there, so in addition to crypto.
It's important because it's complicated because we have so many different players, governments and people and different types, whether it's, Ethereum or Bitcoin or, you name it. So, but you've got to be informed on it. It's kind of like when people didn't know what the internet was. sounded weird. I remember when they used to put like websites on commercials, right? The first Super Bowl that did that, or like this commercial where they're like, there's a thing called the internet, right? And the first time I remember learning about it, they showed like these spiders weaving a web in a cartoonish way. And I was like, what the hell, interwebs? Like, I don't know, but it's not going away.
No.
But to prematurely jump into it before you know what you're doing because you're speculatively buying and trading is no different to me than when people jump into the stock market not knowing what they're doing. So, but to be informed, it is one of those things to be informed about. Gold and silver has consistently been this thing that has been the fear monger's treasure trove. You know, simply it's a bad time. Things aren't going well. So it's like, let's run for gold and silver. But the reality is it ebbs and flows. It goes up and down. And if you don't know why, and if you don't know if it's a peak or it's at a trough, then you're going to be at risk because this argument that, well, gold and silver is finite, people are missing the point that we have derivatives and people are buying on margin and they're buying gold and silver with paper-backed silver or paper-backed gold. So if everybody wanted to redeem that, there isn't enough to be redeemed. I get the notion that there's a finite amount that's being mined and that's available. And because of that, you're going to have more storage of value as a unit of value. And, you know, okay, I get that versus the fiat currency of the dollar. But at the same time, there's major run-ups during times like this where there's tons of scarcity and concern and fear, and there's major sell-offs with major institutions. And so I want them to really look at what are the ebbs and flows of that. Does it cash flow for you right now? And what if you were to have assets that could create cash flow versus an asset that's a storage of value that, yes, may be a lot better than the dollar long-term and definitely during these crazy times, but it isn't creating cash flow for you. And economic independence is a huge part of the answer. Because yes, that might be more inflation protected with gold and silver, but it's not getting you enough cash flow to cover your basic expenses, to create enough freedom to choose what you want to do with your life. And then you have enough cash flow to cover those expenses. So all your active income can go into building more cash flow. And that is going to crush and annihilate gold and silver. So I hate all of the mongering around gold and silver that people are like, you got to get in, you got to get in. I had a client worth $500 million. He went so in 2010 on gold and silver and lost so much money during parts of that. Had run-ups and I had losses. But yes, during 2008 to 2010, big run-up. 2000 to 2002, big run-up, because those were the times that it was recessionary. And how many commercials was it? Cash for gold.
Right.
Yeah, because they're going, sell me your jewelry and shit. So I don't know, does it have some merit? Yes, as a hedge. As your main investment strategy?
Definitely not.
Well, if it's going to be that bad, then I'm going with guns and butter and land and toilet paper and batteries and flashlights and bow and arrow. That's the way to go if you think it's the end of the world, okay? And if it is, I don't know, but you know what? I'm not going to sit here and be fearful about it every day. I'm not going to let it dictate my life. Turn off the news for sake. It is so god awful poison for people, just telling you it's bad and Trump's going to stay in office for a third term and Biden's going to take away your guns, and it's just like, let's fight about abortion and guns and anything and everything, but looking at ourselves and say, what can I do to take action today? How can I create value? So look,
when we're in a state of fear, we can't take action. We're paralyzed.
And you have to take action if you want to combat inflation.
Yes.
Inflation is an enemy to your money and to your prosperity. If you choose not to buy assets, if you choose not to learn how to be a basic investor in just a few things, you are going to lose in the long run.
Okay. Woo, I'm feeling the energy.
A little fired up. I don't know what to say,
that.
you know. So look, gold and silver are valuable, just, you know, it's not like what most people make it out to be. And it's funny how they talk about it during certain times and others. Others, it might be their investor DNA.
Yeah, because you really don't hear much about it unless there's a lot of fear or some big shift in society. You know, otherwise you're not getting ads for it all the time and people aren't talking about it. But there are hedge funds that invest in gold and silver, right? So what happens when they...
part of your hedge?
Yeah.
Right. Like Ray Dalio does some of that, who's an amazing investor. But it's not like that's where he goes all in during chaotic times where everybody else is running towards it, but they weren't doing anything about it when times felt good. So let me get to some solutions here.
Yes.
The solution comes down to one major thing: value creation. How do you deliver more value? How do you solve problems? How do you serve others? How do you discover your skill sets, the ones that matter most, right? Developing critical knowledge, relationship capital. How do you build relationships? How do you have more people that you can learn from and give to and get from? And how do you increase your confidence so that you can bring leadership out and be someone that's part of the solution rather than just pointing out the problem? So, and then I want you to focus on cash flow and more cash flow and more cash flow, especially during these chaotic times. It's not about 30 years from now in accumulation. Those with access to cash, that they can capitalize on the opportunities that are inevitably going to come, whether that's buying businesses or buying deep discounts on real estate down the road. Those are going to be there for people with cash, not for people that are requiring the bank to finance all that stuff. So your concerns about inflation are legitimate. And guess what? Some people think people have less money. There is more money in the economy today than ever in history by trillions of dollars, Stolba. Trillions of dollars.
It's a big number.
That's part of the reason that seemingly we haven't had a bigger dip or more of a recession, because we've just artificially propped this up, right? We've just artificially propped this up, and there's going to be consequences of that. So there's money in the economy. If you learn how to create value, if you learn your biggest skill sets, then you can end up with money that flows to your hands. If you develop your mental capital, if you build relationship capital with others, you're going to win. Those that budget and hand their money over to salespeople are going to lose. Those that get money and then try to make money on their money, well, guess who does that to you all the time and tells you it doesn't take money? Banks, Wall Street, they use leverage and you lose. So how can you use leverage? Well, some of you aren't ready to borrow money. You aren't ready to borrow money and go buy a business because it might hurt you from a cash flow standpoint or a mindset standpoint. So you've got to invest in yourself. Some can create leverage through technology, right? People that develop software. We've seen a lot of people explode during this time with a lot more wealth. So that might be a thing. You can reach more people with your knowledge or what you have to do. Some, they create leverage by building amazing relationships and allowing them to do more and work together to get something. But the key is it's recurring revenue. It's making sure you focus on cash flow. And most financial people teach you to stop the cash flow, kill the cash flow, reduce the cash flow, set it aside, lock it away, wait till 59.5 and be severely disappointed. Look, go to wealthfactory.com/megakit. There's nothing to buy there, but you can download a cash flow guide and you can read my book, Killing Sacred Cows, which takes these 9 myths that help you understand why people get hurt by inflation and what to do instead. Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.